So imagine you're walking down Myasnitskaya Street in Moscow today,
Okay.
and you stop at building number 7. It's this grand historic estate. And carved right into the architecture is a family crest.
Right, with the motto, faith and honor. Or, well, in Russian, it's Vera I chest.
Exactly. Faith and honor. And today, our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the legacy of the man who lived there, Count Grigory Alexandrovich Chertkov. Because we are looking at a pretty profound contradiction here.
Oh, massive contradiction.
Right. Like, on one hand, you have this fierce outdoorsman who actually managed the Tsar's imperial hunting beasts. But on the other hand, he's this meticulous intellectual who built a sanctuary of free knowledge that Leo Tolstoy actually used.
Yeah, the duality of the guy is just wild.
It really is. And I want to make sure we mention right up front that this entire deep dive is built completely on the meticulous primary source research of Nadezhda Ivanovna Knezeva. She runs this really specialized archive site called dogs-history.uu.
And her archival work is just vital for this because, the 19th century Russian aristocracy is usually presented as this monolithic thing. Like, they're all just one type of person.
Right, exactly.
But Chertkov completely shatters that stereotype. And honestly, without Knezeva pulling these really specific threads from, forgotten archives, the mechanics of how this man operated in two completely disparate worlds, it would just remain completely buried.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Starting with his impact on Russian sinology, which is the study of dogs. So the year is 1872. Moscow is hosting this massive Polytechnic exhibition to celebrate the 200th birthday of Peter the Great.
Huge deal at the time.
Yeah, it's this massive industrial and cultural showcase. But Chertkov introduces something entirely new to the program. He organizes the hunting department and a formal dog show.
Right. Which, that fundamentally shifted how breeding operated in Russia.
How so?
Well, prior to this, breeding was hyper-localized. You'd have a wealthy landowner, and he would just breed his hounds for functional traits specific to, his own estate's terrain.
So there was no standard at all.
Exactly. There was no centralized standard. But Chertkov brought this rigorous, almost scientific organization to the field. He established these public exhibitions that basically forced breeders to compare genetics and standardized traits across the whole empire.
I am so curious about the mechanics of that. Because he wasn't just, establishing the rules from behind a desk, right? The archives show he was actively exhibiting his own dogs.
Oh, yeah, he was very hands-on.
Like in December 1874, at the first regular exhibition of hunting dogs and horses, he entered a borzoi named Nagrazde, which loosely translates to reward. And it actually took a small silver medal.
He was deeply invested in the practical application of genetics. At that exact same 1874 exhibition, he brought a pointer named Cab, or, well, sometimes it's recorded in the archives as Captain.
Right.
And he had imported Cab directly from England. But here's the thing. Because the dog was foreign-born, Cab was disqualified from winning any medals himself.
Oh, man. That's a strict rule.
Yeah. But his locally born daughter won a bronze. So Chertkov was actively manipulating these bloodlines. He recognized that native Russian breeds really needed this infusion of international genetics to avoid bottlenecks and just improve their field performance.
Which is wild. Like, bringing a live pointer all the way from England to Moscow in the 1870s sounds like a total logistical nightmare.
It really does.
It shows a level of dedication that goes way beyond just a casual hobby. But looking at the broader historical record regarding this exact period, there's a massive widespread error out there.
Oh, the Sheremetev thing. Yes.
Yeah. If you check standard encyclopedias today, they credit a man named Vasily Alexeyevich Sheremetev as the first vice president of the Imperial Society for the propagation of game and hunting animals and proper hunting.
And it is just a glaring historical inaccuracy. It's completely wrong.
I always struggle to understand how an error like that becomes so cemented in history. It's like a multi-generational game of telephone, right? Where the wrong person gets the credit on Wikipedia and everyone just cites the flawed secondary source instead of looking at the actual 1872 charter.
Exactly. And this is exactly why primary source translation is so critical. To set the record straight for the listener, the charter for the Imperial Society was approved by the Minister of Internal Affairs on June 3, 1872.
Okay.
And at that foundational meeting, Chertkov was elected as the first vice president, or, well, the title was Comrade of the Chairman for a 3-year term, serving directly under the Society's president, Grand Duke Vladimir Alexandrovich.
Right, so Chertkov was definitively first.
Yes. And what's fascinating here is the sequence of events that actually led to Sheremetev's involvement later on. So in 1876, Chertkov's 3-year term concluded, and the society under the Grand Duke unanimously reelected him for a second term.
Okay, so he's popular.
Very. But Chertkov actually declined the position. He cited family circumstances, and only at that point did Sheremetev step in as the second vice president.
Wow.
Yeah. And Yazov's research clarifies another really pervasive error here, too. Sheremetev was from the untitled line of his family. He was a state councilor. He was not a count, even though people often claim he was.
Wait, really? Turning down a unanimous re-election from the Tsar's brother is a bold move.
Oh, incredibly bold.
I mean, in the autocratic hierarchy of 1870s Russia, declining a direct appointment from a Romanov just because you want to spend time with your family seems, well, almost dangerous.
It does. But it really highlights his strict internal code. He accepted an honorary membership instead, and the Grand Duke even sent a personal telegram expressing this profound gratitude for his service.
That's nice, at least.
Yeah, but Chertkov clearly drew a boundary between state prestige and personal obligation. So I pose this to you, the listener. What stands out to you about a man who puts family obligations above a highly prestigious imperial appointment?
It says so much about his character, especially considering the crown wasn't actually done with him.
Not even close.
Right. He steps back from the society, but his organizational expertise is just too rare. So 4 years later, on February 19th, 1880, he gets appointed Master of the Hunt of the Court of His Imperial Majesty.
The Eagermeister.
The Eagermeister, exactly. And he holds that post until 1889.
And the Imperial Hunt at Gatchina was not, some leisurely weekend pursuit. The Master of the Hunt was overseeing a sprawling, highly complex government department.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because, the title sounds so antiquated. You picture a man in a tweed coat blowing a little brass horn.
Riding a horse, yeah.
Exactly. But when you look at the actual scope of the job, it's essentially like being the CEO of a modern massive logistics and luxury event planning corporation. Except the assets are live bears and wolves.
Yeah.
And the clients are the Romanovs.
Yeah, the logistical burden was staggering. Chertkov was responsible for the continuous procurement and maintenance of wild animals and birds for the royal menagerie.
Wow.
He had to manage the breeding, housing, and veterinary care of hundreds of horses and hunting dogs. And that requires a deeply, deeply specialized workforce.
Well, the job titles alone reflect that specialization. The sources mention these words, duzachi and vizyatniki. I have to assume these aren't just your generic stable hands.
Definitely not. They were highly skilled technicians of animal behavior. The duzachi were the senior huntsmen. They were responsible for the overall discipline and training of the hound packs, making sure they worked as a cohesive unit.
Okay. And the others?
The Vizelati specifically handled the scent hounds. They managed them out in the field to flesh out the game. And then you also had net handlers, gun bearers, specialized zookeepers.
It's an entire army.
It really is.
Yeah.
Chertkov had to coordinate this massive personnel roster, ensuring total safety and precision during these high-stakes diplomatic hunts. Because, a single mistake could result in a fatal mauling.
I can't even imagine. Coordinating the feeding schedules, the medical care, the transportation of a live bear in an era before modern tranquilizers or motorized transport.
It's mind-boggling.
He's basically applying the exact same rigorous scientific organization he used at the 1872 dog show, just on a massive imperial scale.
Yeah, he was a master of systemic control in highly chaotic environments, yet the paradox of his personality emerges again here. Because despite all this intense pressure of the imperial court, Chertkov actually sought out isolation.
Really?
Yeah. Through his wife, he became the sole owner of the Skornyakovo-Arkhangelsko estate, and he spent every summer there, retreating completely from the noise and chaos of Gatchina.
His own children actually nicknamed him the Skornyakovsky recluse.
That's right.
Which is so funny. The man who commands the Tsar's roaring menagerie actively seeks out total silence the very moment he's off the clock.
It's a great image, and which perfectly bridges us to the other half of his legacy, because that same meticulous mind that organized packs of hounds and royal logistics was also tasked with organizing history. Grigory Alexandrovich was the heir to a massive intellectual fortune cultivated by his father, Alexander Dmitrovich Chertkov, who was a really prominent historian and archaeologist.
And when we say fortune, the inheritance was a staggering collection of 17,300 volumes of rare Russian history books. We are talking about irreplaceable 16th century manuscripts.
Yeah.
His father spent a lifetime aggregating the deepest roots of Russian history.
It was literally the most comprehensive private collection of Russian historical texts in existence. It rivaled actual government archives, and his father's dying wish was that this collection should serve the public, not just gather dust in some private vault.
But implementing that wish requires a complete shift in aristocratic thinking. I mean, instead of hoarding this incredible wealth of knowledge, Grigory built a dedicated space in the right wing of his family home.
Right, the estate with the Faith and Honor crest on Myasitskaya Street.
Exactly. And in January 1863, he just opened those doors to the public.
And he professionalized the space immediately. He hired Fyodor Ivanovich Bartnev, who was a highly respected historian himself, to serve as head librarian. They established a formal reading room, organized the book storage, and implemented very clear rules of conduct for the patrons.
Wow.
It was a fully functioning, professionally staffed institution, but it was operating inside a private residence.
So what does this all mean? Why is a private reading room in 1863 so significant? Because I really struggle to reconcile the two halves of this man.
It's a lot to take in.
He serves the autocratic Romanov regime at the highest possible level as master of the hunt. Yet he takes his immensely valuable proprietary family archive and democratizes it. In 1860s Russia, knowledge was strictly paywalled. Even university libraries charged access fees.
Exactly. The Chertkov Library was the very first completely free public library in Moscow.
It's kind of like the modern open source tech movement, right? Taking this immensely valuable proprietary thing and just giving it away to advance society.
That's a perfect analogy. By removing that financial barrier to entry, he bypassed the rigid socioeconomic structures of the empire. He basically showed that a nobleman serving the state could also believe that access to the nation's history was a fundamental public right.
That is so ahead of his time.
Right. He was viewing his duty to the state through this really holistic lens. Like, managing the Tsar's hunt fulfilled his aristocratic obligation, sure, but providing free education fulfilled his civic obligation.
And it was operating 3 days a week without charging a single kopeck.
Yeah.
The impact on Russian literature had to be immediate.
Oh, it became the intellectual hub of Moscow. The poet Vasily Zhukovsky was there. The historian Mikhail Pogodin was a regular patron. But the most significant user was, without a doubt, Leo Tolstoy.
I really want to focus on how Tolstoy actually utilized this space. Because when he was writing War and Peace, he wasn't just like casually browsing for inspiration. He needed raw, unfiltered primary sources.
Exactly. Tolstoy spent hours and hours in the Chertkov reading room. He was poring over military dispatches, personal diaries of officers from the 1812 campaign, and these rare historical accounts that simply weren't available anywhere else.
Because state archives were probably pretty curated, right?
So heavily curated. State-controlled archives often presented very sanitized versions of history. But the Chertkov collection gave Tolstoy access to the gritty, granular reality of the Napoleonic Wars, and that directly influenced the incredible historical realism of the novel.
It's entirely possible that War and Peace would lack its defining historical accuracy without Chertkov's decision to open those doors.
But I mean, keeping a private library funded and open indefinitely has to be a massive financial drain on a family.
Oh, a huge drain. Which is why in the 1870s, Chertkov executed the final phase of his father's vision. He officially donated the entire 17,300-volume library to the city of Moscow.
Wow. He just gave it all away. He did. But he attached an ironclad, non-negotiable legal condition. The collection had to remain intact as a separate entity and had to remain completely free to the public forever.
He effectively locked the legal door behind him. No future bureaucrat could ever monetize the collection or lock it back behind a paywall.
Precisely.
But did the collection manage to survive the 1917 revolution?
Yeah.
Because nationalization usually just shatters private collections that get scattered to the wind.
Miraculously, it survived completely intact.
Yeah.
The collection was transferred a few times. It spent some time in the historical museum. But through all the political upheaval and the nationalization of the Soviet era, the core collection remained together.
That is incredible.
Yeah, and ultimately, in 1938, the Chertkov Library became the foundational core of the State Public Historical Library, the GPI.
And the GPI is still one of the most vital research institutions in Russia today.
It is. And the institution continues to honor that original donation by hosting annual Chertkov readings. The books are still meticulously preserved and, true to Grigory Alexandrovich's legal mandate, they are still accessible to researchers.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, that motto, faith and honor, it takes on a much deeper operational meaning. It wasn't merely a feudal pledge of loyalty to the Tsar. It was almost a structural approach to his entire life.
How do you mean?
Well, he applied the exact same rigorous organization to breeding hunting dogs and managing the sprawling bureaucracy of the imperial hunt and safeguarding the historical memory of his nation.
Yeah, he just inherently understood systems. Whether he was managing the chaos of a bear hunt in the forests of Gachina or preserving delicate 16th century manuscripts on Myasnskaya Street, he built structures designed to last. He managed the immediate demands of his era while permanently securing the history of the past.
It is just a stunning dual legacy. The pioneer of Russian sinology, who standardized breed genetics, and the cultural philanthropist, who circumvented the paywalls of the 19th century to give Moscow its first free library.
It's an amazing story.
It really is. But we must explicitly thank Nadezhda Ivanovna Knyazeva and her website, dogs-history.ru. Because historical archives do not translate themselves. I mean, the myth of Sheremetev being the first vice president would still be accepted fact today if dedicated researchers didn't do the grueling work of digitizing and translating the original 1872 charters.
Absolutely.
Without Knyazeva's heavy lifting, the nuance of Chertkov's life simply evaporates into a generalized summary.
And you know, that archival work presents a really compelling parallel here. Grigory Alexandrovich inherited a massive physical archive and built a public reading room so the knowledge wouldn't be lost.
Right?
And today, digital researchers like Knyazeva operate with the exact same philosophy. They take obscure, highly specific 19th century records like dog show results, royal logistics, library charters, and they place them on the open internet free of charge.
They were essentially building the digital equivalent of the Chertkov library.
Exactly. Which leaves us with a critical question to consider about our own modern habits. In an age where we are constantly consuming, saving, and hoarding digital information, we are all essentially building personal archives.
That's very true.
So what is your personal library? What specialized knowledge or niche history are you curating right now that might unexpectedly benefit a researcher 100 years from today?